Yes, then you can speak.
So how do you?
No, you can.
Well, Kanchan, I presume you can hear me. Good morning, General.
I can see a very young face on the right of me.
Danger.
Good morning, sirs. Nice to see you, Major Chandrakant, sir, Colonel Quazi.
Good morning, General.
Good morning, Dr. Nazma, ma'am. I saw Commodore Chaudhary also there.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir. Very good morning.
Good morning, sir.
I was very silent, but my name mentioned, so how can I stop my salute?
Good morning, General Khandare. Nice to see you.
Yeah. Nice to see you, General Kandare.
Hi.
So may I start?
Yeah, please start, Kanchana.
Vice Chancellor Professor Bimal Patel, speakers for today, from Bangladesh, Dr. Nasm Shaheen, Padma Shri Lieutenant Colonel Qazi Sajjad Ali Zahir, Beer Protik, Swadhinata Padak, Indian Veterans of the War, Mr. Shekhar Dutt, Sena Medal IAS retired, Major Chandrakant Singh, Veer Chakra retired, serving and retired members of the armed forces joining us today, guests from Bangladesh, students, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Director, School of Military Affairs, Strategy and Logistics, Vice Chancellor Professor Dr. Bimal N. Patel. Speakers for today, Mukti Jodhas from Bangladesh, Dr. Nasm Shaheen, Padma Shri Lieutenant Colonel Sajjad Ali Zahir, Veer Protik, Swadhinata Padak. Indian Veterans of the War, Mr. Shekhar Dutt, Sena Medal retired. Major Chandrakant Singh, Veer Chakra retired. Serving and retired armed forces personnel joining us today. Guests from Bangladesh, students, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of a director, School of Military Affairs, Strategy and Logistics, Lieutenant General Dr. Subrato Shaha, Param Vishishta Seva Medal, Uttam Yuddha Seva Medal, Yuddha Seva Medal, Vishishta Seva Medal, and Bar, it is indeed my great privilege once again to welcome you all to the fourth webinar we are organizing on the 1971 war. As many of you may be aware, we started with our first webinar in 1970 on the 1971 war in December, where Mukti Jodhas from Bangladesh and Indian veterans of the war joined us in giving us a perspective of and first-hand account of the war on 16 December 2020. This was followed by a director contributing to the cover story of the Outlook magazine on the dawn of the golden jubilee year of Vijay Diwas. In January and February, we conducted webinars on the Battle of Hilli and the Battle of Nayachor, respectively. And today, we are here to talk about 1971, the war against Pakistan's genocide. The chair for today's session would be the director, Lieutenant General Dr. Subrato Shaha. A few words about the chairperson. Lieutenant General Dr. Subrato Shaha retired as the Deputy Chief of Army Staff. He is currently Director SMASL and member of the National Security Advisory Board. The General Officer was responsible for perspective planning, force modernization, and capability development. He created the Army Design Bureau in 2016. Post-retirement, he was the founding Director General of the Society of Indian Defense Manufacturers. Without any further ado, let me quickly hand over the proceedings to the chair. Sir.
A very good morning to you all, ladies and gentlemen. Joy Bangla, Joy Hind. Vice Chancellor, Rashtriya Raksha University, Professor Dr. Vimalan Patel. Our distinguished guest of honor, Mr. Shekhar Dutt, Sena Medal, IAS, former Governor of Chhattisgarh. In the last webinar that we had here, Mr. Shekhar Dutt gave us a view from the ground, narrating his experience as a forward observation officer of artillery in the Battle of Nayachor. It is an honor for us, for him joining us once again, this time to tell us at the highest level why India went to war. We are absolutely honored to have in our midst war veterans from Bangladesh as well as India, Padma Shri Lieutenant Colonel Quazi Sajjad Ali Zahir. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. You have been a source of inspiration for us in this series of webinars that we are holding. Each time I speak to you, there is so much inspiration, such wonderful ideas that you give to us. And I think I must also thank you for introducing me to the next speaker, a very, very respected Professor Dr. Nasm Shaheen, a veteran of the Liberation War, one of the 10, she does not like to be called a Nari Mukti Jodha, I am aware of that, but I must still take this liberty of highlighting how at that young age, she left school, picked up a weapon to fight the perpetrators of genocide. More about them we'll be hearing today. Thank you very much, ma'am, for joining us. A very respected Major Chandrakant Singh, Veer Chakra, who was amongst the first of the Indian Army personnel who went into Bangladesh and went into erstwhile East Pakistan and achieved, this unique distinction. I call it the power of co-creating one between Bangladesh and India. What phenomenal contribution, sir. I'm also grateful to General Vinod Khandare, who's joined us today, General Jidi Bajwa, I can see on my screen, and several other distinguished participants. I'm more than grateful to see a whole lot of my students who, despite their examinations, are all here in full numbers to attend. Nice to see each one of you. Your participation is the most important as I see it. I must also acknowledge the presence of our friends from the United States Strategic Studies Institute of the Army War College, our friends from the United States Joint Special Operations University. They are all present today. So all distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to this webinar. As Kanchana just mentioned, we are in the Golden Jubilee year of India's spectacular victory against Pakistan, and more important, the liberation of Bangladesh. A war that was fought on two fronts, bringing an end to the atrocities and carnage perpetrated by Pakistan on the peace-loving people. It is time to remember and reflect upon the fight against the deceit, the betrayal, the brutality, and the immeasurable sacrifices that altered the course of Indian subcontinent's history, besides redrawing its geography. This is the fourth webinar, 1971, the war against Pakistan's genocide. I must highlight that tomorrow is the 7th of March, 2021, exactly 50 years to the very revered Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's speech when he gave the clarion call for civil disobedience against the tyrannical rule of Pakistan. And I quote from that speech. Bangabandhu said, "The streets of Dhaka, Chittagong, Khulna, Rangpur, and Rajshahi are today being spattered with the blood of my brothers. And the cry we hear from the Bengali people is a cry for freedom, a cry for survival, a cry for our rights." Bangabandhu had tried enough. Indeed, the complete political leadership of East Pakistan had for long tried to get their due within the larger construct of United Pakistan. The seeds of the political struggle were sown as early as 1948, when Jinnah refused to accept the demand for Bengali to be recognized as a national language. There were riots in the 1950s over Pakistan government's decision to accord national language status only to Urdu. The fundamental causes of language and ethnic marginalization were catalyzed by inequitable distribution of national resource, economic exploitation of East, and unfair political representation in the Pakistani parliament. The government of Pakistan's negligent handling of the 1970 cyclone that caused the death of 500,000 people was the proverbial last straw. Riding on the wave of strong resentment against West Pakistan, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman won a landslide victory in the 1970 general elections, securing 160 of the 162 seats in East Pakistan. His arch rival, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto's party, won 81 of the 138 seats in West Pakistan, but neither the military dictatorship nor the political leadership in West Pakistan was prepared to share power with the East. As Sheikh Mujibur Rahman said in a speech, and I quote, "But now, with great sadness in my heart, I look back on the past 23 years of our history and see nothing but a history of the shedding of the blood of the Bengali people. Ours has been a history of continual lamentation, repeated bloodshed, and innocent tears." Between December 1970 and March 1971, Mujibur Rahman's hopes for constitutional acceptance of his six-point demand that called for a true federation of Pakistan were finally dashed. Pakistan responded to Mujibur's call for freedom with the military crackdown called Operation Searchlight. It was directed by none other than President Yahya Khan to crush the Bengali nationalist movement, with the HR set at 0100 hours on 26 March 1971. Operation Searchlight targeted the students, the intelligentsia, and Awami League, sealing the fate of the 6 points and quashing this nascent nation's talent. The estimate of Bangladeshi people killed ranges from 3 lakhs to 3 million. The death toll of Bangladeshi people rose steeply in the months preceding the war due to this genocide committed by Pakistan. And I quote here Padma Shri Lieutenant Colonel Sajjad in the course of an informal conversation. He said yesterday to us, fighting a savage in the animal form is a lot easier than combating the savage in human form. And this morning when we were having a chat, he added, in human form, in uniform. So that's the hurt which must remain, which generations must see, because after all these people, rather many of these people who butchered people of East Pakistan were later honored, awarded, and rewarded by Pakistan, thus, building a culture of genocide in that country. A disastrous fallout of Pakistan Army's massacre was the massive influx of refugees from East Pakistan to India. The number of refugees touched 10 million in just about 4 months. By 3rd June, the 509 refugee camps set up along the border were finding it impossible to cope with the magnitude of migration. Large-scale camps had then to be set up in 8 states across India. For India, the perils were clear. Besides the humanitarian crisis, the political, social, economic, and security consequences could be disastrous. Described as a Holocaust unmatched since Hitler, Pakistan's objective of the genocide was to force the Bengalis to seek refuge in India so that a demographic change could be effected. Exploiting the situation, Pakistani agents infiltrated with refugees to cause sabotage in India. At least 400 such agents were arrested in Assam and Meghalaya alone. Domestic opinion in India was in favor of strong action and recognizing Bangladesh. State legislative assemblies of Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Assam, Nagaland, Tripura all passed resolutions recognizing the state of Bangladesh. The central government was initially cautious. They clarified in July 1971, and I quote, "We are not opposed to the recognition, but the decision would be taken at the appropriate time when we find that it is in our national interest and also of the freedom fighters to recognize Bangladesh." This timing was critical. On the one hand, for the recognition to be effective, it was important for India to be able to intervene decisively in East Pakistan if required. This would involve preparations for a swift military victory before Pakistan could secure UN intervention with either American or Chinese assistance. On the other hand, there was a limit to how long the liberation struggle could survive without support against Pakistan's barbaric destruction. Work on contingency plans for Pakistan's military crackdown against East had commenced soon after the December 1970 elections. By end February, the surge in military deployment in East Pakistan had begun, and so were the diplomatic preparations. Yahya Khan was assured of America's commitment to Pakistan's integrity. By 1969, Pakistan was proving itself to be more useful than ever before to USA by providing the secret channels of communications with China. The US leadership, i.e. Nixon and Kissinger, were of the view that the China-Soviet Union tension could be exploited to benefit the US. Given China's size and growing importance, the US could leverage its relations with China to counterbalance Soviet Union's involvement in the Third World, and more important, help in a respectable exit from Vietnam. the US tilt towards Pakistan had two immediate effects. First, President Nixon ordered a review of the earlier Johnson administration's arms embargo for Pakistan. And second, there were US presidential directions not to squeeze Yahya Khan in this crisis, i.e., US would look the other way even as the deplorable genocide was perpetrated in East Pakistan. On the other hand, China was driven by multiple considerations. First, splitting of Pakistan was not in China's interest, as a liberated East Pakistan, in China's view, would naturally tilt towards India. Second, China needed to retain its influence on the pro-China political parties so that they could continue to have their influence. In any case, they had not performed well in the December 1970 elections. So therefore, China was not inclined towards favoring Pakistan's military solution. But at the same time, China needed to support Pakistan as their relations were growing closer after the India-China War of 1962. In 1963, you may recall, Pakistan had illegally ceded 5,180 square kilometers of territory in the Shaksgam Valley of Ladakh region to China. And Pakistan was becoming dependent both economically and militarily on China. Under these circumstances, in early 1969, in the China-Soviet Union clash along the Ussuri River, China had suffered relatively much heavier loss. On the Vietnam front, China's involvement in supporting Ho Chi Minh against the US was increasing. For China, opening two fronts against two superpowers, both Soviet Union and USA, weighed heavily in their strategic calculations. So overall, China chose to be indifferent to the massacre in East Pakistan, calling it an internal problem of Pakistan, even as it continued to supply arms and ammunition to them, the same arms and ammunition that was being used to perpetrate terror and the barbaric acts in East Pakistan. China was bitterly critical of India's actions like harboring the Bangladesh government in exile. It accused India of expansionism, and the massive influx of refugees was of little concern to China. With the China-Soviet Union rift intensifying, Moscow was keen to deepen its relations with India. In 1969, Soviet Union proposed a treaty of friendship to secure a special relationship with India. India was initially reluctant because of its policy of non-alignment, but with the growing connect between US and China, I think the die was cast for an exclusive relationship between Moscow and New Delhi. On 9th August 1971, the foreign ministers of India and the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic signed the Treaty of Peace, Friendship, and Cooperation. Meanwhile, Pakistan, emboldened by the support from US and China and the ambiguous position taken by many countries, hardened its stance. In August 1971, Pakistan first issued a white paper squarely blaming Mujibur Rahman and the Awami League for the crisis. Mujibur was tried for treason. 79 of the 160 elected members of the National Assembly and 195 of the 228 members of the Provincial Assembly were disqualified. Beginning September 1971, a civilian governor and 10 provincial ministers were appointed. 2 of the 10 ministers were rebel Awami League leaders. The other 8 were unelected. So thus, having marginalized the Awami League, the government of Pakistan ordered by-elections to the vacant seats to be held from 25th November to 9th December 1971. This was meant to be Pakistan's political solution to the crisis. In August 1971, Pakistan issued a district-wise list of refugees, which included just about 1/4 of the total number of people who had fled from East Pakistan and come into India. According to analysts, the list covered just the Muslim refugees, implying that the Hindi refugees would not be allowed to go back. The situation was clear for India. There would be no political solution. India decided to build military pressure. The support to Bangladeshi freedom fighters was increased. Side by side, deeply concerned at America's meddling with Awami League leaders and the attempts to sow dissent between the Awami League leaders and the freedom fighters, India stepped up its diplomatic blitz. Indian leadership reached out to UK, US, Europe, and several other countries. By now, it was quite clear that there was no place for international mediation, and scaling down troop deployments was unacceptable. So for India, the solution lay only if Pakistan released Mujibur Rahman and resumed negotiations with Awami League. By now, Pakistan had also assessed that with Soviet Union solidly behind India, UN intervention is unlikely to succeed. So on the 3rd December 1971, Pakistan launched preemptive airstrikes on 11 Indian air bases along the Western Front. Pakistan's strategy was to attack in the West so as to relieve pressure in the East. This was more than enough reason for India to take that much awaited decision of recognizing Bangladesh. Speaking to the nation on 4th December 1971, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi said, and I quote, "Since last March, we have borne the heaviest of burdens and withstood the greatest of pressure, and a tremendous effort to urge the world to help in bringing about peaceful solution, in preventing annihilation of an entire people whose only crime was to vote democratically." She said, "Today, the war in Bangladesh has become a war on India, and this imposes upon me, my government, and the people of India an awesome responsibility. We have no other option but to put our country on war footing. Aggression must be met, and the people of India will meet it with fortitude and determination, with discipline and utmost unity." The 1971 war against Pakistan's genocide, the war for liberation of Bangladesh, thus began. Time available to India was limited as the US 7th Fleet sailed into the Bay of Bengal. Despite the pressures, the war witnessed some very fine operational maneuvers executed in a superbly shared diplomatic and political environment where the entire nation stood united. With the people of Bangladesh, we co-created the power of being one. By 16th, 17th December 1971, 92,208 West Pakistani soldiers, sailors, airmen, paramilitary personnel, policemen, and some civilians surrendered in East Pakistan, ending 24 years of Pakistan's atrocity. Bangladesh was finally liberated. What would be equally relevant to consider, should these perpetrators of war crimes, should these perpetrators of genocide have gone scot-free? And I think we will hear a lot on that as we hear our very, very respected and distinguished speakers speak to us today. So to begin today's proceedings, it is my honor, it is my school's honor, my university's honor to invite Padma Shri Lieutenant Colonel Qazi Sajjad Ali Zahir, Veer Protik, Swadhinata Padak winner, Bangladeshi Mukti Jodha, to speak to us on 1971, the genocide and war crimes perpetrated by Pakistan. It's over to you, sir.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure on my part to appear before such a respected panel. And thank you, Lieutenant General Subrata Saha, for making a very fine presentation, giving all the details. That makes job much easier for us. Before I start my lecture here, I'm very delighted, very honored to have two great warriors in front of me, two war-wounded freedom fighters whose blood is still flowing through the rivers of Bangladesh. Major Shamsher Mobin Chaudhary Bir Bikram, wounded in the Battle of Kaludhar, a fabulous warrior, one of the finest soldiers Bangladesh has produced. On my right is my dear friend, who is much younger than me, Major Chandrakant Singh, Veer Chakra, the hero of battles of Meghna, Ashuganj, Norshindi, Rayer Bazar, what to name for. Fabulous company commander. I don't know how he survived through the war with all the challenges and expeditions he encountered. Both of you make my day. I'm delighted to be present in front of you. I'm humbled by your presence. I would also like to commend Dr. Nasm Shaheen, who is very well known to me. We have done many programs together. She's a specimen of a brave woman, a young girl who went to fight the war against Pakistani war criminals. That's very important. To each one of you, known or unknown to me, let me thank you again from the core of my heart for coming and attending this seminar. Today is the 6th of March. 50 years back, Father of the Nation gave in clarion call for independence of Bangladesh. He gave a call. Declaration came a few days later. He followed the path of history and stood up against Pakistanis and made this famous speech, 7th of March speech, which has been included by UNESCO in the memory of the world as one of the finest speeches in the world. Coming back to the subject about genocide. Respected panel, I was a humble and a junior officer of Pakistan Army when the war started. Whatever I have heard, whatever I have seen, whatever I have felt, and whatever I have studied, I want to give a small picture of that in front of you. Actually, in 23 years, Jinnah's Pakistan was becoming a Qabristan for us, a graveyard for us. Standing on the edge of the graveyard, Father of the Nation gave his call for people to take up arms. Enough is enough. Enough of torture, suppression, insults. We have taken and no more. To study the genocide of Pakistanis, I'm very interested to read the books which are written by Pakistanis and what the Pakistanis told in 1971. And if you study through them or recapitulate them, then the aspect of genocide will become very clear. Let me start with General Tikka Khan. Tikka Khan was the commander of the Eastern troops in the Eastern Front, Commander Eastern Command. 26th morning at 6:30, he comes out of his command post and screams, Dhaka has no people. Only few stray dogs are living and walking on the streets. Bobby has used everything in his hand. Who was Bobby? Brigadier Jahangir Arbab, commander of 57 Brigade of Pakistan Army, which had started Operation Searchlight in Dhaka. Bobby has used everything in his hand, every weapon. On the same evening on the 26th, around 5:30, Yahya Khan gives a statement I will kill 3 million of them, and rest will eat from my palm. Rest will eat from my palm is beggars eat from somebody's palm. And he said the word 3 million of them. Let's come back to the statement of General Amir Abdullah Khan Niazi, who, wearing 23 war medals, has surrendered to the Mukti Bahini and Indian force in Ramnath Escorts Maidan on 26 March without fighting a single battle in Dhaka. What a shame, ladies and gentlemen. We have 26,726 soldiers present in Dhaka on 26th of March. And 3 days before, you have a press conference and say, touching his chest, I will stand in front of the gate of Dhaka, facing up to the Indian tank regiments. They will have to roll over my dead body to enter Dhaka. They didn't have to roll over his dead body. They just had to give him a pen to sign, which General Arora gave it to him. What a shame. And why a shame? Why? Because it doesn't matter to them. They are shameless people. I'm not being abusive. I am being historical. Let me come back to the aspect of genocide, gentlemen and ladies. Pakistanis are habitually a genocidal nation, and I make a statement when I talk about it. In 1969, I went to Balochistan. While entering a tea shop, I found on the right side of the tea shop on the wall, in red letter, it was written, Amma Lal Teri Khoon Kiya Khuniya, the famous Karbala poem of rebel poet Nazrul Islam. Amma Lal Teri Khoon Kiya Khuniya. I was a little surprised. Bengali poets writing in a restaurant, a tea shop near Quetta. I went to the shopkeeper and asked him, Ye kya hai? He took out his eyes, put his head down and said, Dekho mat, bolo mat, tikka aa gaya. That is Tikka Khan. Gentlemen, for Operation Searchlight, Pakistanis had selected Tikka Khan because he has successfully done genocide in Balochistan. Habib Jalabi, the famous poet of Balochistan, wrote, Balochistan is nothing but a zinda kabar, a living grave, entire country. But we had a leader called Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. He did not allow Pakistanis to take us for a ride. He did not allow Bangladesh to become a living graveyard. He told people to fight. So first genocide they did in Balochistan. They are highly successful. All the files of Balochistan genocide were brought back in the general headquarters. Exactly the same thing was done. Lakhs of soldiers were sent to Balochistan. A Punjabi general called Tikka Khan was posted there as the commander. All the foreign journalists were thrown out immediately, which they also did in Dhaka. They made a secret plan, Operation Searchlight, and they launched the operation. Glory to Pakistan. You put divisions after divisions in the streets of Dhaka, Chattogram, Kumilla, Noakhali, Faridpur, and the deep villages, and all the armaments were purchased with the dollar earned by the poor people of Bengal, Bangladesh, by selling jute, tea, and other materials to the international market. But here they don't finish. Next genocide they have conducted was in Jordan. You'll be surprised, but I'm a living witness. I went to Jordan, did some research on that. We are all aware that the Muslim brothers were being thrown out of Palestine by the Israeli army. They are crossing the river Jordan and taking shelter inside Jordan in the refugee camps. And many went to Lebanon, many went to Iraq, and many countries. But most of the refugees came to Jordan. They were in a horrific condition. They are asking for more facilities, and they were asking for more facilities in the form of education, healthcare, and some of their rights after so many years. King Hussein of Jordan wouldn't give them any rights. And there was some agitation in the camps. He called in General Ziaul Haq of Pakistan, commanding the training division in Jordan. And Pakistanis had all the support for him. He launched a campaign against the unarmed Jordanian Palestinian refugees living in Jordan. So many were killed. We don't know the numbers. Many had to again cross over and took shelter in Lebanon and in Iraq and many other countries. I do not know how many people they are killed. Those refugees had embraced me and cried and said, "We cannot even cry loudly." Let me quote Moshe Dayan, who once said, "The number of Palestinians we have killed in 26 years was much, much less than what General Ziaul Haq of Pakistan has killed in 26 days. The world has kept quiet. Pakistan calls and shouts about Islamic Ummah. And this is their Islamic Ummah. Ummah is brotherhood. You kill your brothers. They have continued their killing. With the unrest in Afghanistan, thousands of young children with their families, the students, took shelter in Peshawar and many other places in Northwest Frontier Province. Pakistan ISI was very active. They had to make an army out of them. They located a young boy called Mullah Amr, sent him to Lahore Jame Masjid Madrasa, and from there ISI took him up for training. And Mullah Amr became the Taliban commander. They are launched by Pakistan ISI into Afghanistan. And when the Northern Alliance and American soldiers were moving in, Taliban were outgunned and outnumbered. They were all withdrawing to Pakistan. Pakistani regiments took their automatic weapons, killed them in the valleys before they could cross the border. Third genocide. There is a movement going on in Sindh, Geo-Sindh movement. They are also being subjugated. How many genocides will you require to prove that you are a genocidal nation? I do not know. Let me come back to Bangladesh. How did this genocide start? Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujib earned a massive victory, as General Saha has said very correctly. And on the 1st of January 1971, he rang up Yahya Khan and told him, "Please hand over power to the parliament." And parliament session have to be held in Dhaka. Yahya Khan came for a dialogue along with Bhutto Sahab. Useless dialogue. They had something else in their mind. Yahya Khan goes back to Karachi on the 16th of January 1971. He calls for a meeting of a few bureaucrats, forces commanders, important generals, ISI commanders, and tells to them in a dramatized way, "I am very tired now." And General Akbar Khan, ISI chief, goes running with a big packet and said, "Sir, that's the reason I have brought Black Dog whiskey for you. Drink it little, you'll become perfect." and that it will energize your body. He says, I will drink that later on. Now, I feel we should go for bird shooting. Tell the media not to disturb us anymore. We are going for bird shooting tomorrow morning. Media went away, disgusted. They wanted to have a press conference. In the name of bird shooting, 3 helicopters took up this entire lot and landed near the palace of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. 3 helicopters. They all went down from the helicopter. They are received by 3 great people. Mr. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, Mumtaz Bhutto, his cousin, and a very cruel politician from Singh, later on became a federal minister, and Mustafa Khair, later on became governor of Punjab. These 3 people entertained them in the palace. Whole night they drank Black Dog whiskey. I have no problem with that. But I have a problem. They didn't discuss about bird shooting. They discussed about Bengali shooting, both B. What they planned is the Larkana conspiracy, and no conspiracy has any record in world history. But history has a proof. And some things are leaked out. They decided on Operation Searchlight and the future of Bengali nation. First of all, they decided that Mujib will become the prime minister. He will form the cabinet. First, he will make Bengal militia group. We have, Pakistanis have 6 militias: Jhelum Rangers, Ravi Rangers, Satya Rangers, Northern Scout, Tochi Scout, Thal Scout. And Mujib will now make lakhs and lakhs of Bengal militia. For the first time, independently, militia force to be created, all composed of Bengalis. Presently, Bengal regiment has 25 to 30% Punjabis and Pathans and Baluchis and Sindhis. So is East Pakistan Rifle, the border guards. Now, they said that this is a dangerous thing. Next thing, Mujib will implement his 6-point program. In the 6-point program, there is an aspect called equality. By the pretext of equality, Mujib will put 56% people, because we are 56%, in the Army, Navy, Air Force, in ISI, in the command channels, the GOCs, and everywhere. Civil servant, engineers, doctors, everywhere. Then they say that we will have no position. We'll lose everything. My brothers and sisters, Pakistanis used to call us as Abduls. Abdul word means knocker. Knocker means chakur. They said for 23 years we have kept them as our knocker. Now Mujib for 100 years will make us into knocker. And we can never be in power because they are 56%. Then what can we do? We should take a lesson from history. We should reduce their number. How? Like we did in Balochistan. When you did the campaign, many died and many ran away. So the same lesson we must bring in the form of Tikka Khan, make him the commander of the forces in East Pakistan. Secretly bring in lakhs and lakhs of soldiers, divisions after division soldiers with weapons. Make an operation plan, that is Operation Searchlight. Secretly launch the operation plan. What will happen then? Bengalis are scared people, they are cowardice people, they are non-martial race, they have never learned how to fight. They will put their hands up and surrender. It will be so easy to reduce their numbers and will advance towards the villages and will start killing in the villages. Millions will go back, cross the border to India. There they will get hungry. They will keep looting the villages. We have no problem. Their numbers will keep on reducing. They had made a plan of 3.5 to 4 years to reduce the numbers of Bengalis to 35%, so they could become 65%. Very simple. Then they had planned for something more serious. We have to rule Bengal from now ourselves. And Islam Pasand, parties like Najam Islam, Jamaat Islam, Muslim League will support us. And their young cadres will recruit them into forces like Al-Badr, Al-Shams, Razakars. These are all the holy warriors of Islam whose names will be used to make their morale very high. And what a disgrace for Pakistanis. They made them into rapist forces. And we'll give them everything, weapon, arms, and salary. And they can do any looting, anything. We have no problem. Next thing they decided is Mujib has a group of people in Bengal, in Bangla, whom he calls intellectuals. They are doctors, engineers, writers, professors, teachers, journalists. They are intellectuals. They are the force of Mujib. They carry his legacy. They propagate for him. That's what they say. And we have to cut them out now. Otherwise, they will start motivating the people of Bengal after we have finished Mujib and his group. What can you do about them? They are very intelligent people. So we can put him, our most intelligent general, to finish them off. And who is he? Rao Farman Ali. He will be in charge of killing the intelligentsia of this country, which he did, of course. We know, we have the documented proof. And finally, decision was taken in a very brutal way. General Akbar Khan said, ISI chief, sir, we have a problem there. We are planning for an operation for 3.5 to 4 years. Our soldiers are young. And here I would like to apologize for my statements to all the ladies present. But we have to face the reality of life. That's very important. What happened, happened. But we must understand what happened also. All these soldiers are young, youthful. Their families will be in West Pakistan. They cannot bring their families to the operation area because East Pakistan will be declared an operation area. But after a few months, 3, 4, 5 months, they will have physical need. They will have to go back to Pakistan, but we will not allow them to go. What will happen? They said we have a simple solution. Before lakhs of soldiers mount the ships or the aircraft, they will be lined up for a darbar. Regiment of Punjabi Maulanas who wear big turbans, whitish beards, very well respected Maulanas who are almost all Punjabis in the regiments, they will come and give fatwa. First they will say, all my friends, the soldiers, you are going for a jihad. In jihad, the rules are different. When you land up from the ship and the aircraft in East Pakistan, you will find many people. Their names are Salam, Barkat, Safiu, Jabbar, whatever name you see, all Muslims' name. But these are not their names, they are code words. They are basically non-Muslims, they are munafiqs, they are haram khors, and they are characterless people. It is all right to kill the munafiqs in a jihad. And the commanding general will say, as per army rules and regulations, army rules of instruction, if you kill any civilians, you'll be court-martialed. For this time in Bengal, you will not be court-martialed. Next thing, they will say, my friends, the Maulanas will say, when you land up in Bengal, you'll find many women there. They will say their name is Fatima Begum or Nurun Nahar Begum or Khairun Nahar Fatima, many Muslim names. They are all code names. They are munafiq women, they are non-Muslims. They are characterless women. In a field of jihad, which Bengal is, you can enjoy them. You can rape them. You can murder them. There'll be no guna. There'll be no sin. Commanding General will say, ARI and AR rule will not be applicable. Rape, murder will not be subjected to anything. any punishment. Gentlemen, the proof is this. 3 million people are killed. Not a single soldier was court-martialed. More than 500,000 women are raped. Not a single soldier of Pakistan army was tried. Please let us face facts. And Pakistanis have to face the facts. And then the most dangerous thing came up the discussion. One of the generals, sorry, I can't name him because I don't know the name. Some Pakistani officer have told me about it, and I think he's right. Because some of the subedars and soldiers we captured, they confirmed to this statement. They say that you people, these our young soldiers are going to rape in Bengal. They are going to rape women. Within 10 months or 11 months, new children will be born. What will happen to these children? And the decision was, they are our few Pakistani Bengalis. Punjabi Bengali hoga. They will look like us almost. They'll be tall. They'll be fair looking, not like Bengalis, short and dark. Their hair will be a little bit reddish. Faces will be long. Chest will be wide. And they look like us. There will be a few generations of Bengali Punjabis. They will help us to rule this country. Gentlemen, think a little. Close your eyes. Am I right or wrong? God in front of us. God will do justice to those people naturally. But we have failed to deliver justice to them. This is what is called Larkana conspiracy. Entire genocide of Bangladesh was based on Larkana conspiracy and the planning. Gentlemen, let me tell you about generalship now. Pakistani aircrafts were coming regularly. All the aircrafts of Air Force were engaged. PIS, most of the aircrafts were engaged. Pakistan International Airlines. They hired 6 aircraft from Holland to come to East Pakistan with soldiers. On the way back, they used to carry the dead bodies and the wounded. But Niazi changed the rule. After some time, dead bodies are not going back. Woundeds are not going back. What was going back is pan, the betel nut, the pan you did. It was very popular in Punjab, in Karachi, Sindh, everywhere. Quite expensive. So Niazi became a pan trader. Instead of sending dead bodies, he should trade with pan. If you do not believe me, if you have access to Hamdur Rahman Commission, you'll become accustomed to it. So that is what is their character. But then they forgot one thing, that Bengalis are not a cowardice nation. To my military friends over here who have trained the Mukti Bahini, and I have gone to many camps of Mukti Bahini, training camps. Indian officers should take me some time that you know Pakistani tactics and how we can counter them, those things. And they are full of praise about every Mukti Bahini who was being trained by them. And Major Chandrakant has left columns of Mukti Bahini. Ask him what he feels about them. Bengalis are not very high or big structured people, but they have a tradition of 1,000 years of warfare. We have fought against the Pathans, the Mughals, the British, and the Pakistanis for hundreds of years. We are the children of Honorable Titumir, Haji Shariatullah, Shamsher Ghazi, Abu Turab, and Haji Shariatullah. These are all peasant warriors of Bengal. The unique battle we fought for hundreds of years against the occupation forces, these are the peasant warriors. And if you close your eyes, you'll find every Mukti Bahini wearing a lungi and a small vest and a fatwa. These are all children of those great warriors. And we had to give only one thing for this country, and that one thing was a single life. So we are prepared for it. And to my friends of Indian Army, I acknowledge their bravery. I always say that they died very young for the cause of a young country. I was entrusted with the job of honoring every Indian martyr soldier. Every night, I sit down and write their death and life stories, and I cry. So young, 17, 18, 9 years, 19 years old, never had a family. They'll have no children to carry forward their legacy and their blood and their glory. That's the tragedy of 71. Gentlemen, the bigger tragedy of 71, we are still facing it now. Pakistanis had lost in 71, but they won in the conference table. In Shimla conference and Delhi conference, they took their criminal soldiers back to Pakistan. Almost everyone was awarded and rewarded for their genocide in Bangladesh. Tikka Khan, promoted full general, commanded the Pakistan army. Brigadier Jahanjeb Arbab, maximum genocide he conducted 26, 27 nights. Promoted Lieutenant General Corps Commander. Rao Farman Ali, promoted to a higher rank, Chairman of Fauji Foundation. Everything that we know of, they have awarded them, never punished them, which Bhutto committed. Gentlemen, that is the reason they keep doing genocide. And we look in utter silence because we have let them go. How will you reconcile with this fact? When the tormented women of Bangladesh ask us, they did everything to us. The worst crime, the rape, and you let them go. We have to put our heads down and shed our tears. And that's the end of it. Still, we can hold them accountable. Still, we should recognize internationally the war crime and genocide of Pakistan army. We should try them, every one of them. If you cannot try them, let us try them if they are dead posthumously. If they are hiding in Pakistan, let us try them in absentia. Still, records should be done. History is a fascinating entertainer, but a very poor teacher. History hasn't taught us anything. Pakistanis have again attacked in Kashmir, in Sindh, in all the border areas, and in Kargil, and every part, because they have never learned from history. Let history say so, that together we fought and won the war in 71. Let history say so sometime, that we have won the war also by trying the criminals of 1971. Otherwise, our next generation will not forget us on both sides of the aisle, India and Bangladesh. And the soul of the Indian soldiers will be tormented, will be insulted. At least those soldiers who are prisoners of war, everyone was killed brutally. We have proof about that. Your soldiers have proof about that. Most of the POWs, they have killed them very brutally. They haven't paid for it. Let us remember every martyred soldier of Indian forces, every war wounded valiant officers and soldiers of Indian Army. The more than 500,000 Bengali women who faced atrocity but never got justice. the 3 million Bengali population which perished in 71, and the war wounded freedom fighters. Let us sing their praise. Let us hug them, if not physically, but virtually, time and again. And let the friendship of India and Bangladesh grow through the blood which has flown. And I always say, the blood of the Indian soldiers were flowing, are flowing, will still flow through Padma, Meghna, Jamuna, and Tista, through the pages of history. And as Nitish Kumar writes in his famous book, The Land of Two Rivers, Mahabharat to Mujib, let us remember this great writer and teacher. And let us also remember all the heroes of 71. And finally, they pay rich tribute to Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. He sacrificed the life of his own and his family's for the cause of Bangladesh. Joy Bangla, Jai Hind, Joy Bangabandhu. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Shri, Colonel Qazi Sajjad Ali, for what I would say a very spine-chilling and soul-stirring narration. Sir, you're very right. You were not abusive at all. You were only being historical. And I endorse that fully. And the wonderful narration of Larkana, I think, for the generations that survived the war and the generations in the future must remember, as you said, was not to kill birds, but to hatch a plan to kill Bengalis. And finally, I think it requires a lot of courage in the manner in which you chose to defect from that genocide perpetrating army and come on this side, and based on your plans, as we all are aware, how operational plans of India were drawn. Very soon we'll be doing a battle study of one of those plans. I wish we had longer time with you, and I would only request the audience to go and peer into the 54 books which have been written by Colonel Sajjad Ali, the wonderful book that you wrote for the clause. And I think as Indians, as Indian military people, we shall always be grateful to you, sir, for the amount of work which you have put in to honor every Indian martyr. So thank you very much for everything that you're doing. May God be with you. It's now my turn to invite Dr. Nasm Shaheen, by profession now a professor, but I think it's a life full of inspiration. It's a life which will continue to inspire for people for generations, whether it is in studying nutrition, whether it is in contesting the Pakistani soldier. And if you see her social and political career, it's all about, I think, fighting for what is right. Ma'am, your biodata, I think, would not be done justice if I were to try and read every bit of it. All I get inspired for is you are a person who has fought for what is right. And I think on that note, I hand it over to you, ma'am, for sharing with us your experience of the Liberation War for the benefit of future generations in the world. It's over to you, Dr. Nasm Shaheen.
The screen. Can you see the screen?
No, ma'am.
You cannot?
No.
So, let me share.
It's visible now, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So, respected Vice Chancellor, Rashtriya Raksha University, war veteran, and respected audience of the webinar, Good morning and greeting on the occasion of Golden Jubilee of Independence of Bangladesh and Mujibur. It's a great honor for me to share my experience of liberation war in front of respected audience. First of all, I would like to pay tribute to Father of the Nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and respectfully remember the martyrs of the liberation war, including all movements of Bangladesh. At the same time, I would like to remember and pay tribute to all Indian soldiers who gave their lives for the independence of our motherland, and also gratefully acknowledge the contribution of all Mukti Yoddhas, Indian Army, government, and people of India who gave shelter, food, training, and arms to fight against Pakistan Army to liberate our motherland. Today, I have to invite you to share my memories of liberation war with new generation. I was a student of class 8 in the school during the liberation war. Maybe you became surprised, how could I become a freedom fighter at such a young age? So it would be easier for you to understand if I could enlighten a bit about the political context of that time in the then East Pakistan, though Lieutenant General Subrata Saha explained the background of history of liberation war. In 1948, the government of Pakistan declared Urdu to be the sole national language of Pakistan, even though Bangla was spoken by the majority of people, combining East Pakistan and West Pakistan. The East Pakistan people protested since the majority of the population was from East Pakistan and their mother language was Bangla. They demanded Bangla to be at least one of the national languages in addition to Urdu. The demand was raised first by Dhirendranath Dutt from East Pakistan on 23rd February 1948 in the Constituent Assembly of Pakistan. The people of the East Pakistan started a movement to protect their language. The students of University of Dhaka, with the support of general public, arranged massive rallies and meetings. Students decided to break 144 and 10-member team came out on road to break 144 imposed by the government. And my father was one of the 10 members of the first team who broke the 144 first and arrested and imprisoned for 39 days. On 21st February 1952, police opened fire on rallies. Salam, Barkat, Rafiq, Jabbar, Shafiq died with hundreds of others injured. This was a rare incident in history where people sacrificed their lives for their mother language. On February 21st, we gained the right to language with bloodshed. As you know, 21st February is recognized as the International Mother Language Day by UNESCO. To prevent the discrimination by West Pakistan, the 6-point movement was forwarded by coalition of Bengali nationalist political parties in 1966, led by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. The main agenda to end the exploitation of East Pakistan by West Pakistani rulers. The 6-point movement demanded a federation of Pakistan with more power to state, separate central bank to control money flow to West Pakistan, transparent taxation policy, separate foreign exchange earning accounts, because during that time, East Pakistan earned more foreign currency by exporting the jute, and establishment of separate military and paramilitary force in East Pakistan. Soon it became the popular and eventually it became the mandate of the people which united the whole population of the East Pakistan. So to repress that 6-point movement, President Ayub Khan hatched a nefarious plan of quelling the growing movement of six-point program. In January 1968, a false case, infamously known as the Agartala conspiracy case, was filed, and 35 Bengali civil and military officers were accused of treason and conspiracy against the state of Pakistan. Sheikh Mujib was made the principal accused, and the case itself was officially styled State versus Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and others. And President Ayub Khan formed a special tribunal to trial the accused. The case caused a great turbulence in East Pakistan. In the morning of 15 February 1969, a Pakistani Havildar shot point blank at Sergeant Jorlock at the door of his jail cell and killed him, which fueled the anger of the public, and East Pakistan was no longer in the control of the West Pakistan, known as 1969 Uprising in East Pakistan. The six-point movement of Awami League under the leadership of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, initiated in 1966, sustained a temporary pause consequent upon the en masse arrest of the Awami League leader, including Bangabandhu, institution of Agartala conspiracy case in 1968, and repression on the Awami League activists. So the students of all different forums united and made a Chhatra Sangram Parishad, that a united forum for students. They declared the 11-point charter of demand, which is the reflection of the 6 points. And during that 69 movements, after the death of the Sergeant Jorlock, in post-procession, the Asaduzzaman, student of Dhaka University, shot, killed by the police. And in 24 January, the Motiur of school children of Navakumar school killed by the police. So the mass uprising of 1969 and Ayub government is fall down. During this movement in 1969, there is a group of student activists in student league dreamed for independent Bangladesh, inspired by Netaji Subhash Bose, Master Surya Sen, Pritilata Wadedar, and other hero of the Indian independence movement. So they are believe that we should fight against the Pakistan Janta and make free our country from the Pakistani oppression. So in 1970, there is a general election, and following the fall of General Ayub Khan, the Pakistan general election in 70 held on 7 December, which was the first general election held in the Pakistan. The Awami League Bengali Nationalist Party mobilized support in East Pakistan on the basis of its 6-point program. In East Pakistan, a huge majority of Bengali national favored the Awami League under Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. And the party received a huge percentage of popular vote and emerged as the largest party in the nation as a whole, gaining the exclusive mandate of Pakistan in terms both seats and votes. But in 1st March, the Yahya postponed the assembly of the parliament, and the 1st March, the mass people became agitated due to the postponed of parliament session. On 3rd March, and Bangabandhu declared the non-cooperation movement against Yahya government. And you can see the 2nd March, the huge gathering of mass people at Bortola, we called it Bortola, Arts Faculty, University of Dhaka. First Bangladeshi flag was hosted by the student leader of Chhatra Sangram Parishad. And during that flag, the golden map was inside the red circle. And in 3rd March, announcement of Shadin Bangla Manifesto at Palton Maidan to give the outline of the Bangladesh, the national anthem of Bangladesh, the flag of Bangladesh, and other manifesto of Shadin Bangladesh. So here you can see some pictures of those activities during the turbulent days of the March 71. So finally, the 7th March, the speech is a political grammar. Now this speech of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman is a famous and historic speech. And he delivered this speech in front of over 2 million people. The Bengali people were inspired to prepare for a potential war of independence amid widespread reports of armed mobilization by West Pakistan. During the speech, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman proclaimed, "Our struggle is for our freedom, our struggle is for our independence." And here you can see that after the declaration of this struggle of freedom by Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the Students' League organized a training for their workers. So here you can see the training for the female students at Arts Faculty, University of Dhaka. And here is my picture during 1971. I was the student of 8th grade, and my elder sister, Lutfa Haseen, she was the student of 10th grade, and we participated in this training program from March 8 to 25th March in 1971. And 2 ex-army instructors, they gave us training during this period. So in 23rd March, Student League observed the Potaka Dibosh. During 3rd March, it was a Pakistan Day, and the Pakistani flag was hosted in every building. So on protest of that, during that day, Student League hosted the Bangladeshi flag in each building of Dhaka city, except few government office and cantonment. And the march past of the train student at Palton Maidan, and after march past, they went into the house of the Bangabandhu's residence to hand over the flag of Bangladesh to the Bangabandhu, father of the nation. So on the morning of the 25th March, we took training in Kolabhavan, and that day we took training on how to occupy an enemy camp and hoist the flag of Bangladesh on its roof. We climbed on the roof of Kolabhavan and crawled with dummy rifles. We hoisted the flag of Bangladesh on the flag stand at the top of the dome and chanted Joy Bangla. From the top of the roof of Kolabhavan, we saw a rickshaw full of books, and Professor G.C. Dev was walking side by side with the rickshaw. He was very learned professor of philosophy department of Dhaka University. He was killed that night by Pakistan Army. He cannot finish the reading of those books, what he learned from the library of Dhaka University. At around 10 o'clock in the night, the renowned professor of Bangla department, Ahmed Sharif, called my father from our house and informed that Pakistan Army was coming towards Dhaka University with a tank and ammunition from the cantonment. At that time, the center of the movement was the Iqbal Hall, which is now the Sergeant Zorlok Hall, was very close to our building, the residential area, because my father was the registrar of the Dhaka University. 2 persons were sent to inform the student of Iqbal Hall to leave the hall immediately. And my father instructed us not to turn on the light or peek through the window when we heard the gunshot. And when after 12, the shooting was started around 12 o'clock at night, and we all crawled together at a drawing room. The sound of the heavy gunfire made it seems as our building was about to break. After a while, they were giving instruction with the tracer light. When we saw the azan, that the call for prayer started in the early morning, my father said that this time it seems the army will leave, but they didn't go. But the level of firing and shelling was increased because the Pak army thought that DU, Dhaka University, was the cantonment for Bengalis. And in the morning, we realized that Pak army not go back to cantonment. In our building, we were 8 families of Dhaka University faculties, but one from the West Pakistani, Dr. Naqvi, professor of Urdu department, left by 1st or 2nd day of March. So we took shelter in that flat. In the evening, Pak army fired the British Council, which is very adjacent to our building. And it was a horrible experience, 25th and 26th in Dhaka University campus. You can see some of the picture of Operation Searchlight. So here you can see the monument of Jagannath Hall. Pakistani occupation forces carried out a planned massacre on the Dhaka University campus on the dark night of March 25th, with killing over 200 students, 10 teachers, and 12 employees. Jagannath Hall, non-Muslim dormitory, and Iqbal Hall, now Sergeant Jorlock of Dhaka University, and Pilkhana, Rajarbagh police line, and Hindu prawn areas of the old Dhaka were the main target of the Operation Searchlight on the black night of 25th March in 1971. Professor Fazlur Rahman and his 2 relatives were killed at building number 23 situated Nilkhet residential area. And Professor Jyotirmoy Guha Thakurata, the provost of Jagannath Hall, was severely injured by army attack and died at hospital later. Dormitory electrician Chitra Bali and eyewitness Rajkumari Devi stated that the doctors of Dhaka Medical College Hospital recognized Dr. Guha Thakurata, the eminent professor of English department, and buried him under a tree near Dhaka Medical College morgue. An assistant house teacher was also killed at that dorm. This is the flat number 12 in Fuller Road. It is in our campus, and we see the army enter into that campus and called Said Ali Noki, the professor of sociology department, and they allowed him to go, but killed Professor Abdul Moqtadi, who was a resident of the same building. His body was found as Zolok Hall field, and we were the eyewitness of this killing in our campus. And at the building number 11, Mr. Sadek, a principal of University Laboratory School, was also killed. And here you can see the other name also. I cannot read out the every names. And after when the curfew was withdrawn in the morning of 27th March, we left the Dhaka University campus and we went into the Jinjira, and from there in our village. And we were stay 2-3 months in our village. But when the army is going to the villages also, we have to come back to our resident at the Dhaka University campus. So during the month of August, the second batch of liberation forces, the first batch of liberation forces inducted into Bangladesh, and they contacted with us, and we decided to join to the liberation war. And my elder sister and I joined into liberation war without telling my parents. And we told them that we are going to school, but we didn't went into school. Rather, we joined to the Khosrow group, the commander of Bangladesh Liberation Force. Their base camp was in Dembra, and we went there. And there, our commander, Kamrul Alam Khan Khosrow, trained us how to detonate grenade, how to operate the stain gun, how to clean. And he made the bush of jute and then practice the firing. So after that, when some students gathered together for the second batch of liberation, Bangladesh Liberation Forces, we were in the month of September, we went into Agartala through the Koshba. And in Agartala, we stayed at Sridhar Villa first. When the other female students came in Agartala, our commander of Eastern Sector, Sheikh Fazlul Mani, and second in command, Ashma Abdur Rab, they organized a separate house in Gold Park of Agartala, and then organized a training at Lembuchhara camp. So here you can see that this picture with Captain KB Singh, and 10 of us. Here you can see there 8, because I already entered into Bangladesh with the second induction of second batch of Bangladesh Liberation Forces. So I'm not inside in this picture, but here you can see the other member of our female students who took training in Lembuchhara camp. So when we tried to enter into the Bangladesh in the month of November, and as far as I remember, it was a Eid day, we have to wait for 2-3 days because there was a heavy mortar shelling between the Pakistan Army and Bangladesh Army and Allied Force, and we cannot enter into the Bangladesh, so we have to stay 2-3 days at the Hatimara camp. And when the shelling becomes a little bit lesser, then we enter into Bangladesh. There was the 3 team. One team was my team. We would come to the Dhaka. There was another team led by the Shiv Narayan Das with Gitosri Chaudhuri, another female freedom fighter, and another group also, the they went into the Kumilla. So we entered under the mortar shelling, and by walking a long distance, finally we took the boat, and we had the huge arms ammunition. That ammunition kept into under the base of the boat, and we was on that to give the impression that the boat has nothing. So finally, after 1 day and night, we come into our base camp in Baliapara, Dembra. So here I can share the one of the experience that in 6th December there was a heavy fight and the Damra was free. Noshingdi Road is about 3 miles away from our main base, Baliapara, and suddenly large contingent of about 2 companies of infantry battalion of Pak Army was coming to attack our base camp. First, they started arson and looting in the villages around Noshindi Road. Upon receiving the news, our BLF guerrillas with weapon and a group of newly arrived freedom fighters trained from Malaghar in India rushed forward. And we all took up position behind the bushes and the paddy fields, which villages are about 800 yards away from the Pak Army position, and the freedom fighters were told not to open fire until the Pak Army came within effective range. Meanwhile, news came from the command of Bangladesh and allied forces stationed in Noshindi that an enforcement was being sent soon so that we could keep our defense intact. Note that despite the fighting between the two sides in Ashuganj and Voirab Bazar at that time, some parts of Noshindi have already been declared as free areas. The operation of the Pak Army in the front village continued to increase at an alarming rate. They then set fire to all the houses in the village and opened fire all around. Between the villages attacked by the Pak Army and our position were vast paddy field. The frightened people of the affected village were trying to escape through the paddy fields in fear of their lives, and the Pak Army was firing indiscriminately at them. None of the women, men, children in the lab could be saved from their slaughter. And so some freedom fighter of FF did not wait and opened fire with Joy Bangla and went ahead. As a result, the Pak Army found out some of our position and started firing at us with machine gun and all kind of weapons. Their mortar shells came and started exploding in front of us. The freedom fighter had to retreat for the purpose of hiding. Meanwhile, the freedom fighter in charge of their LMG-1 lost consciousness when he was shot by the Pak Army. His body lay next to the aisles of the battlefield. No one was able to move forward to rescue him. In this situation, our second in command, Murad, crawled forward and dragged the bullet-ridden freedom fighter to a safe place. Immediately after this situation, the Pak Army went down to the paddy field and started firing mortar shells and firing towards our position. The battlefield then took on extreme proportion in the shelling of both sides at that time, as our enforcement and allied helicopter from Noshindi flew over the position of the Pak Army, and as soon as they saw they saw it, and they started firing at the helicopter instead of us. The helicopter turned at lightning speed and flew toward Noshindi and came back again. When they returned, they first fired at the Pak bunker along the culvert on the Noshindi highway. Here was the Pak Army bunker, and destroying them in an instant. Unable to survive in this situation and realizing defeat was inevitable, the Pak army left Bulta and Golok Nandal and fled towards Tarabo and Kachpur, leaving behind many bodies, weapons, and supplies. However, very few Pak soldiers were able to return from the battlefield that day with their lives, and we are survived from the Pak army attack with the help of Allied force, and the Damra become free on that day, 6th December. And finally, the Bangladesh is liberated in 16th December. So here is the Vijay Diwas celebration. For the first time, we invited for the celebration of Vijay Diwas at Eastern Command of Indian Army. And here you can see the other two of my colleagues with me. And here is the group photo was taken with the war veteran and other member of the teams. So, Joy Bangla, Joy Bangabandhu, and also Joy Hind. Thank you, Dhanyabad. I should acknowledge the government of India for their support and Indian Army, Peoples of India. And for this webinar, I should acknowledge Lieutenant General Subrata Saha and for coordinating Kanchana Ramanus. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for a very nice description of your entire story, including defeating the Pakistan army. And I think equally fascinating was your story of putting the flags at the right places, on Pataka Diwas and going and handing over the flag. I think each one is a fascinating story, and we would love to hear more on that, and would certainly like to be in touch with you as we go forward. Before I go over to the next speaker as per our schedule, I would just deviate a little from the program that we had made and request another veteran, Major Shamsher Chaudhary, to give us his first-hand experience of the genocide that we are discussing or we are trying to relive this morning. It's over to you, Major Shamsher Chaudhary, sir.
And thanks to the organizers of this event at a very critical time of our history, and to have picked up the subject of genocide that was committed by the Pakistanis in 1971 in Bangladesh. Just slightly going back for a minute to history, I think the real evaluation of Bangabandhu's historic speech on 7th of March 1971 has not yet been done. What I'm trying to say is this: that we were army officers, Pakistan army officers on that day. But when we heard his speech, the first thing that came to our mind was that this was the first time in the history of Pakistan that the leader of a national mainstream political party, riding on a massive public mandate, served an ultimatum to the government of Pakistan. This has never been done in an institutionalized way. In that, other political leaders have said, or rhetorically. This was Bangabandhu's clear and call to the Pakistanis that if you do not hand over power to the elected representatives, among other things, then our only path is, our struggle is for freedom and our struggle is for independence. Now, the word independence being mentioned by Bangabandhu on that day sparked off reaction in Pakistan. And I was at Chittagong as a lieutenant and acting adjutant of my battalion, 8 East Bengal. By late afternoon, after Bangabandhu's speech, I get a telephone call from one Lieutenant Colonel M.R. Chaudhary, who was the first military officer to be killed by the Pakistan Army in cold blood on 25th March night in Chittagong Cantonment. He convened a meeting of senior Bengali officers in Chittagong. Among them were Major Zia Rahman, Captain Rafiq, Captain Amin Ahmed Chaudhary, and others. And they made an assessment of Bangabandhu's speech and what kind of reaction Pakistan will have. they came to the conclusion that Pakistan would probably try to, quell any kind of struggle or anything the Bengalis were launching under Bangabandhu. And they as a first step, they will try to disarm the Bengalis in the army in East Pakistan, including our battalion, 8th East Bengal Battalion. The decision those officers made, this was a very, very brave decision by serving Pakistani military officers. That if they try to disarm us, we would resist. If necessary, we will revolt. So that's why the 7th of March speech of Bangabandhu has a huge historical, military, political value that needs to be assessed. Now, coming back to my own first-hand witnessing an act of genocide by the Pakistan Army. I was wounded in action, as Sajjad had said earlier, while trying to defend Kalughat Bridge, being seriously outnumbered. When Pakistan Army attacked, the 25th Frontier Force Regiment of Pakistan Army attacked in an attempt to take the bridge. We were seriously outnumbered and hugely ill-equipped and under-equipped. But we managed to resist as long as we could. In the process, I was wounded. A bullet made in China, fired by a Pakistani soldier, entered my left thigh, passed through my lower abdomen, and fractured my right hip. And that's a permanent disability I carry to this day, but I carry it with pride. In this severely wounded condition, I was taken prisoner by the Pakistan Army. Now, in an article I wrote in the Daily Star on 9th of December 2015, the article was entitled, Pakistan Still in Denial and in Deceit. The article, if you give me just 4 minutes, General, I'll read out the article so you'll understand what genocide actually took place. Quote, "It was a day that shall remain indelible in my memory for as long as I live. It happened in Chittagong on 11th April 1971. Having already revolted against the Pakistan government on the midnight of March 25th in the face of the murderous assault by its army on the freedom-loving people of Bangladesh, I, then a lieutenant in the army, was engaged on that day in fierce defense of the strategically located Kalughat Bridge in Chittagong, now called Chattisgarh. This was on the Chittagong-Cox's Bazar Road. The 25th Frontier Force Regiment of the Pakistan Army was advancing towards the bridge, aiming to capture it. We, the freedom fighters, we had student folks amongst us, were vastly outnumbered and seriously ill-equipped. But we were determined to resist the advance for as long as we could. At the height of the battle, I was hit. A bullet from the advancing Pakistan Army unit pierced my body as it entered through my left thigh, passed through my lower abdomen, and shattered my right hip. Seriously wounded and bleeding profusely, I was taken prisoner of the Pakistanis. This story is not about my battle, nor is it about my particular injury. It is about genocide. It is about crime against humanity. As I was placed on a Pakistan military jeep, my hands tied and my body in agonizing pain, I was made to witness a spine-chilling act of brutality that could have served as a script for Serbia's Milosevic's ethnic cleansing program of Bosnian Muslims. Close to the scene of the battle was a cluster of mud huts whose occupants had provided us support and encouragement leading up to that fateful day. From my position as a captive, I saw members of the Pakistan Army, commanded by an officer, drag out the male members from the huts, tie them up with their hands behind their backs, make them sit down in a circle with their back towards each other, and then proceed to shoot them in their head at close range. One by one, their heads rolled to a side in death as each bullet hit its desired target, blood spurting from each shattered skull. What was even crueler was that just before carrying out this act of collective execution, the Pakistani soldiers asked the women folk, wives, mothers, sisters, and daughters to stand there and watch the whole gruesome act in silence. They were not even allowed to shed tears for their dead. From where I was in the military jeep as a captive, I witnessed the whole episode as it unfolded right before my very own eyes. The pang in my heart accentuated the pain from the battle wound. This, General Subrata Saha, was crime against humanity in full display, planned with precision and executed in cold blood. The victims were unarmed civilians whose only wish was freedom from tyranny and liberation from occupation. Those were early days of our liberation war, and such acts of brutality and genocide were repeated hundreds and hundreds of times over hundreds and thousands of villages all over Bangladesh in 1971. So I wanted to share this particular experience with this August gathering today. Since I was a prisoner, if I may take the liberty of just addressing Air Vice Marshal Praveen Bhatt, who was in the screen a little while ago. Air Vice Marshal, I was a co-prisoner with 2 Indian Air Force pilots in 1971, then squadron de Bhutani and Flight Lieutenant Lemon Trier. My hats off to your brave fighter pilots who fought sorties over Dhaka. The planes, the aircraft were shot down by the Pakistan artillery, but they braved. But today, I feel great satisfaction and pride that I not only we not only shared blood, we had shared prison cells together for the liberation of Bangladesh. This has been a great opportunity for me to share this experience with you, and I hope we'll have more of such events as we go into the 50th year. But 50th year should not be the milepost. This should be a continuous process so that the truth comes out, people are held accountable, and such acts are not repeated anywhere. I thank you very much, General Subrata Saha. Thanks off to everybody and all your Indian colleagues who are here. Hats off. And thanks to my fellow freedom fighters from Bangladesh who are here. I can see A.W. Chaudhary, Zahir. Joy Bangla, joy Bangladesh, India friendship. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, Major Shamsher Chaudhary, sir. I mean, we would have definitely missed this, phenomenal account which you have made. In fact, as I said, it's absolutely touching, every word of what you have said. And who can forget, this narration, a bullet made in China, fired by Pakistan. And if I were to link it with what Colonel Sajjad said, it's the same story which is going on getting repeated. Today, the bullet is made in China. It is being fired by Pakistan. It is being funded by China in Balochistan. We are seeing it happening because this culture of genocide, the point that Colonel Sajjad brought out, I think you brought it out in some detail. So thank you very much, sir, for giving this contribution. I now turn to Major Chandrakant Singh, Veer Chakra, a war veteran who was amongst the first to enter Bangladesh. He has already been spoken about very briefly by Colonel Sajjad. I think besides being a great warrior, I think he's also a good scholar. He has written books, and I think lately he is working on Roar of the Tiger, the Liberation War speeches of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. So when he told me this, I got inspired to request him to speak on Roar of the Lion, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. So thank you very much for joining us, and it's over to you, Major Chandrakant Singh, Veer Chakra, 1971 war veteran. Sir.
General, firstly, my thanks. For me, this has been more like a reunion. Sajjad Bhai is an old friend. Mr. Shekhar Dutt, an old friend. A word about him. Pakistan should be actually giving the highest award to General Niazi. Because had Niazi not surrendered, Shekhar Dutt will bear out with me that had the war lasted one more week, maybe the whole of Sindh, where Shekhar Dutt was leading the advance, would have been India's. The history of the subcontinent would have been different. History plays games. And the best part is yesterday, when we were trying out this rehearsal of this, when Dr. Nasm Shaheen came in, she was going over the same geography over which I had gone through in 71. Dembra, Bulta, Barpa, Narsingdi, Agartala, where she was trained, I was there. And then Major Chaudhary just now the same geography. Kalur Ghat, this is after the war, when we were chasing the hostiles. Kalur Ghat, Malum Ghat, I spent 4 months in Malum Ghat, which is just a little, quite close to Kalur Ghat on the Chittagong Cox's Bazar Road. It's quite fantastic. But today is the eve of the famous golden speech by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. Those of your listeners here and viewers here, I would suggest to them that that's it. Go on to YouTube and listen to the speech. He was an orator par excellence. My Indian friends would forgive me. Panditji Jawaharlal Nehru's speech, Tryst with Destiny, is famous. It's great words. But when you go onto YouTube and see it, he's reading out the speech. I'm fortunate, it's my fortunate to have heard the Sheikh live on 2 occasions. Not that golden speech, but I was there as a part of the protection party at the Dhaka airport when he arrived on the 10th of January, then escorted him to the Maidan where he gave that speech. And then when we paraded, my battalion paraded in front of him on 12th of March 1972, he gave a speech to us thanking the Indian nation and the Indian Army for help that we gave them for the thing. I don't think there's been a speaker like him anytime, anywhere. All his speeches were extempo. He had that heavy Bengali voice, and with this shock of hair, he looked like a tiger and sounded like a tiger. That's why I've given the name of my book, The Roar of the Tiger. I just cover his 4 speeches that he gave during this 71-72. First, of course, is the speech of the 7th March, his intention to declare independence. Then a very brief account, of course, on the 25th, 26th night of it. Then the other speeches on his arrival after his release in Dhaka, and then the farewell speech to us who were parading in front of him in it. So I feel privileged to have been a witness and a part of the history of a land and people whom I love as much as my own. I would like to digress a little bit from the script that I think we in India, the veterans community, have to thank Colonel Sajjad for several things. It is he who has taken the initiative for our veterans to be honored by the government of Bangladesh, most of all by Sheikh Hasina herself. It is he and we cooperated, and it was our idea to publish a joint book called Liberation 1971. Here I'm holding it in my hand, and Her Excellency the Prime Minister has accepted that book, and she signed that, autographed that book. In it, Sajjad has done more for our country, good relations between the 2 countries and renewing friendship than anyone I know of. And he remains a dear friend. His own story of his escape as a young para-artillery officer into India is quite chilling. How he came in with the operational plans of the Pakistani Para Brigade, which helped us in our own operations later on in the Shekhar sector. Thank you, Sajjad. We shall be indebted to you for what you did then and what you are doing now. Coming to the question of atrocities, which forms this main head of it, I was a witness to this. My battalion was one of the first to be inducted to a place called Sabroom, which is just north of Ramgarh, in south of Tripura. Ramgarh is across the Feni River, was then East Pakistan, and Sabroom was on the Indian side. When members of the Pakistani, Major Chaudhry would bear out with me, some of his troops, including people like Zia and Rafiqul Islam, they crossed over. I received them. In fact, some of them, Zia and Rafiq, spent 3 months with me quite often in my own tent. And we saw the trail of refugees. We saw the wounded, the children. It was horrific. It was horrific. And for the first 3 months, I think the government of India itself, everybody was taken by surprise as to what was happening. Everything that you all have related, the previous speakers, is true. And I'm a witness to it. After the war, in Dhaka, I visited the rehabilitation and counseling camp which was set up by the Bangladeshi government. This photograph, I don't know whether you can see it clearly, but what it is of a woman who was raped, and some of them are pregnant. This photograph was taken towards the end of December at the counseling and rehabilitation camp in Dhaka. There were thousands of such women. The photographer of this, General, I'll make the hard copy available to you, or a better copy to you, by a very famous photographer, J. Olal of Stern magazine, who was embedded with my battalion towards the end of the war at a place called Demra, which Nazma has been talking about. He, along with the later Sidney Schamberg, who later on became the editor of the New York Times, joined us at Demra. And there were thousands such women. This atrocities was not just confined to ordinary women. Here is a photograph taken, yes, of the Sheikh's family, Mrs. Mujibur Rahman and her family, outside the house on the 17th, again just after their release by Ashok Tara, again taken by J. Olal. On the roof of the house, you see the two arrows which I pointed? Those are the bunkers the Pakistanis had erected for them. And I have letters from Sheikh Hasina's sister, Rehana, telling us as to how every day they feared for their lives. How badly, short of food they were during the months of captivity. So it wasn't just very common. They did it to the East. Then Dr. Nazma. Few people are as to the role the women played. The women freedom fighters played in the liberation of Bangladesh. After the heliborne crossing, in which I was lucky to be a part of, on the 9th of December from Brahmanbaria to a place called Raipura, which is a little northeast of Narsingdi. The second helicopter landing took place at Narsingdi, which all of them, including Nazma, has been talking about. Here is a photograph of a lady woman freedom fighter who joined us with a gun in hand and 3 children in tow, coming to join us. This is proof which my own countrymen, Indians, need to know, that the role that the women freedom fighters played in Bangladesh. They fought, they suffered, and now they are building that nation. All the 3 speakers from Bangladesh, I was a witness to this, and I get choked when I talk, when I even think about it. And you revived memories, not happy memories, the sad memories. All along our advance, there were dead bodies of men and women and children lining the roads. But Bangladesh has emerged from it triumphant. And as an Indian brother, I wish them well and happiness in the future. I don't want to take more of your time because this is not a battle account. This is an account of the atrocities. As far as the Sheikh is concerned, we have our own father of our nation, Mahatma Gandhi. Without in any way diminishing his position, but he had the support and the foundations built by Tilak, Gokhale, and Lala Lajpat Rai, and a whole host of others. Mujib fought a lone battle, supported by the people. No other leader of Bangladesh was equal. Some years ago, there was a poll, I think it was 2012, conducted of the greatest Bengali in history. It was conducted both in India and West Bengal and Bangladesh. And rightfully, both Muslims and Hindus voted overwhelmingly that Mujib was the greatest Bengali in the history that we know of. And this day, the eve of his golden speech, is, I think, the right day to celebrate and commemorate the great man and his memory. I think, General, we need to thank all of you, all of us need to thank you for putting this together. And thank you very much. And salams to you, Sajjad Bhai. Nazma, I wish I had met you at Demra in those days when I was in my late 20s and you were a young teenager. I missed you meeting you. That's one of my bad luck. And Major Chaudhary, you fell down as a victim before. Otherwise, you and I would have shared a drink at Sabroom, which Zia and Rafiq used to do. Thank you, General. Sorry, I won't take more time.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, for this wonderful narration and talking about the greatest Bengali amongst several other things that you brought out. And we certainly are looking forward to this book of yours, and it would form part of, I think, our curriculum over here as a facet, as a means by which we will try to inculcate the qualities of leadership that I'm sure you're bringing out through your book. So thank you very much indeed, sir. I really appreciate your wonderful contribution to this this event, and we look forward to being in touch with you in the future. It is now my turn to invite our guest of honor for the day, distinguished guest of honor, Mr. Shekhar Dutt, Sena Medal, Indian Administrative Service, for the keynote address. Very briefly, as I said, he was the former governor of Chhattisgarh, former Deputy National Security Advisor, former Defense Secretary. So the last time we heard his story bottom up, he narrated his experience as the forward observation officer going along with 3 in-depth armored squadron, taking a hook to go get close to Naya Chor. So that was a story by itself. And as a young officer, he had the wisdom to keep a small notebook and a camera with him so that he is able to narrate those stories with some wonderful pictures, rare pictures actually. So today we have requested him to take the story from the other end and tell us all why India went to war. It's over to you, Mr. Shekhar Dutt, sir.
Thank you very much, General Saha. And I firstly salute you for taking this initiative in getting all of us together. And you've been, there's echo. Is the communication better now?
Sir, please go ahead.
It's gone now, sir.
Okay. Right. So thank you very much. It was, you've been doing some fantastic work because as the previous speakers have said, this is an unfinished work. And we have, we really have seen the depth at which Pakistani military had fallen and carried a genocide very systematically, and as earlier speakers have said, with a great plan in mind, which was hatched in their cover. Now, firstly, I must recognize all those who have spoken before me, Major Chandrakant, Ms. Nasm Shaheen, Qazi Sajjad Ali, and the officer who spoke, who was injured badly in that spell. I salute all of them, and they have really brought out some very interesting facets about this whole episode. And like I said, this episode is still unfinished. We have to bring a large number of military officers and others who have carried out this genocide. And the world is very much keen on following genocide, but somehow this genocide in which 3 million people died, and many of them women, children, and scholars and other, they are not connected with the armed forces at all. They also were systematically butchered. So this is something which is, I would also bring out, last time when I had gone to Bangladesh for a different kind of a reason, this was taking part in an international conference where our High Commissioner at that place, at Dhaka, Mr. Harshvardhan Shringla, had presented me with this book. It's the Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's unfinished memoirs, and a fantastic reading. Sheikh Hasina, madam, has written the foreword and the preface, and it is something which is which shows the Sheikh to be a scholar, and a fantastic scholar at that. And this is an unfinished memoir. I start with saying that the foundations of this kind of a uncharitable, simply bad leadership in the armed forces of Pakistan happened at the time when Pakistan was formed. Why I'm saying it is that the power, the control, or the center of gravity of Pakistan moved into the hands of the Pakistan Punjab. The rest of the Pakistan at that time, which included East Pakistan, were not given powers. The bulk of the forces were from Punjab state. The population, although much lesser, at that time the population of Bangladesh was 51 million, or East Pakistan was 51 million, and West Pakistan was 43 million. And West Pakistan, as we know, consists of the state of Punjab, the state of Singh, the state of Balochistan, and northwest frontier provinces, and a huge lot of other tribes, Waziris and Pathans, and many others. So Pakistan, Punjab must have been much lesser, and yet they had the power. Now, therefore, this partition of India, and thereby and thereafter getting promoted into becoming a independent state, was a bonanza to the Pakistani leadership and the center of gravity of Pakistan at that time, and it still is. It still is, and therefore the marginal people over there are Baluchis, Sindhis, and the other Afridis, Waziris, and many other tribes, and they don't matter very much. Again, the kind of clever manipulation in order to bring further power to them started right at the time, 1940, it when this tribal, basically it was Pakistan army people, and they moved into the state of Jammu and Kashmir and tried to forcibly take. Now, this all are certain scheme, part of the scheme of the rulers or the actual rulers of Pakistan, and they still continue. A friend of mine who was in our police and who had been posted abroad mentions that one of the ISI chiefs, and who's still very much revered in Pakistani establishment, said that ये कहानी खत्म नहीं हुई है, ये तब खत्म होगी जब आप आपके कंट्री के छोटे छोटे हिस्से नहीं हो जाते. So this is the plan, and this is how these people have been going around. Now, it also shows that there are many people who have always thought nationality, religion, the race or ethnic groups cause an unity. Pakistan defies that. In Pakistan, it is also smaller denominations like Sunni, Shia, and a very large reason is language. So the seeds were born right in the beginning because the people who took control of Pakistan disregarded the existence of other language. And like Nazma ji has said that in 1948, there was this first sign of division that, yes, what about our language? Why is our language not even recognized as a language which can be called official? What about now? Then 1952 was the first time when actually numbers of people were killed and mercilessly in order to show that don't talk about this. And I feel very humble that Nazmaji's family was involved in that, and your father was also one of those people who took part in that demonstration, and later many of his colleagues died. Now this is a kind of situation which showed that a state like Pakistan cannot or could not have come into existence. It is sheer luck that the center of gravity went through into this state. I have also another reason to say this, because when in the 1971 military operations, we took 2 districts, and there were countless times when there were flag meetings. The flag meeting in the state of Singh with the Pakistan Army, there was a chap called Colonel Malik who used to always come, a Punjabi. So they don't trust the soldiers or officers of other languages, and they control the country by placing their people in this. So this is how it is. And one could, as a one could sort of feel that why is only this fellow coming at all different places? And so he's been authorized by the Pakistani army to speak. And that's the kind of a control they had, and that's the kind of a control they have even now. Another thing which was quite evident and which I came sometime by accident or sometime by being in these kind of positions, and that was the support Pakistan or these people who were the central, who had the control of Pakistan, got in the world was because of United States, and they wanted to use Pakistan's proximity or closer contact with the Chinese. After the Second World War, which almost coincided with India's freedom, after the Second World War, the world immediately became polarized. So there were one which was led by the United States of America, the other was led by the Soviet Union, and this polarized world, Soviet Union, along with China, became a substantive power. Right from the beginning, the US interests have been to divide this relationship. And where could they get this kind of a support? A large country which is bordering China and which has surrendered its right to govern, like Pakistan, they had extremely good contact with the leadership of China. So Kissinger, who was a great planner, he was tasked that use whatever means you can, but come closer to China. And that was a very important task of the United States, because how do you divide the Soviet bloc without firing a bullet? And that was achieved. And Kissinger, with the help of the Pakistan element, went and could drive the Chinese to separate their interests from the Soviet Union. That was also the start of China becoming a superpower, because China had to be given something. And what did they give? They gave to China the ability to manufacture quality goods by providing them with the what otherwise would be called IPR. So later on, when we were discussing, we found that big companies like, say, Walmart's 28% in the end of 1990s, 28% of its turnover came from Walmart's products made in China. And at that time, Walmart's 28% was almost the size of India's GDP. So this is the kind of a benefit which America got and the Chinese got in return. And therefore, the Soviet Union, this whole bloc split. It was followed later on by emergence of Gorbachev, and then the Soviet Union itself split into large number of countries and Russia of present day. The seeds of this had been helped germinate by the Pakistani very clever strategicians. Much later, I was talking with Kissinger in one of the roundtable meetings And I told them that now you are telling the world that they should get into a missile relationship, to provide the air cover. And I'm saying that, and I said that you are now worried that the Chinese have become powerful. But you caused the Chinese to become this powerful, because you provided the Chinese with all the kind of abilities and also increasing their economy to this level. So Kissinger looked, he nodded, and he said, I never saw it that way. Anyway, his task was to divide the Eastern Bloc, and he succeeded. Pakistan has been helping in such manipulative manner the power of USA. And as we know that they, in order to get rid of the Soviets from Afghanistan, they helped develop the concept and used it. And Mujahideen took a cause of jihad, and they said, okay, if you want to fight in Afghanistan to get rid of the Soviets from there, it is jihad. And other young people of other countries, everybody flocked. And Mujahideen, Taliban, and later on Al-Qaeda was formed. It's a different thing that Al-Qaeda turned its guns on USA itself. But USA's objective of getting Soviets to get out of Afghanistan was achieved. And this was done by the Pakistani. Having achieved this and understood the strength of low intensity warfare, the strength of using very young people to say that jihad is what is required and you become a jihadist, and use military objectives to be performed by them, became one of the important Pakistani tactics. And they're still doing it because it serves their general extremely well. And like just now, one of the previous speakers said that they have to be brought, the Pakistani leadership and especially the armed forces leadership have to be brought to book on several accounts. Because this low intensity war is a prescribed kind of a continuous tactics which will come against normal development of any region. Wherever people don't agree with the state, will use this low intensity conflict. The Pakistani ability to manipulate this became quite clear after the language riots happened, and they then wanted to take huge amount of force. So therefore, the numbers of people who were killed in Bangladesh, and I don't know the figures of number of Bengalis who were in West Pakistan who were trapped and killed was enormous. And very cleverly, nobody protested in the free world. And somehow all these became in a large extent visible during the 1971 period. So I think that that the one of the bigger reasons of Pakistan's or West Pakistan's this adventure in present Bangladesh was that they had been successful in seeing that they can dominate any uprising by force. This they didn't understand, and the extent of which the present Bangladesh population defied the military. Because many places the defiance against state is defying the police, but usually the military is not defied by the citizens. Here was a case where military was defined by the citizen, and therefore it's a significant amount of bravery shown by the people of Bangladesh, and especially the people who were from all walks of life. Many of them professors, academics, doctors, and as I said, that media people, and in fact, this kind of defiance is not very common. So my surmise is that yes, it is an unfinished work. Somehow we have dragged it on, but we have to actually identify and bring to book, even if they are dead, the people who committed this genocide, the people who ordered this genocide. And again, we honor those who have laid down their lives in this, and I thank General Saha for organizing all these people together, and we are discussing about this today. Thank you very much. Jai Hind.
Thank you very much. As always, you speak straight from the heart, straight out of your personal experience. No script. It comes, I mean, absolutely spontaneous, bringing so much value to the day's proceedings. We enjoyed it the last time. We are again benefiting from it now. Thank you very much. And I think the most important message which you have given to us today is, dead or alive, bring to book the perpetrators of this genocide. I think that is the single most pointed message which we must take note of and take it forward, so that history is corrected and it is not, like what Colonel Sajjad said in the beginning. He is here talking about history. He's got no animus to anyone, but that history must, be dealt with the way it should. So with that, I would now invite the chief guest of the day, the Vice Chancellor of Rashtriya University, Professor Dr. Bimal N. Patel. He is a professor of public international law, and I'm sure he will have much to add on the suggestion of the guest of honor that bring to book the perpetrators of the genocide. He is a professor of public international law. He was erstwhile the director, the Vice Chancellor also of the Gujarat National Law University, and in multiple committees connected with law and even otherwise. And in his current assignment here, from the time that the Rashtriya University took its new designation, new role, he has been heading the university, trying to take the complete initiative of national security in a 360-degree sort of expansion, and taking the onus of it all together. So with that brief introduction, I hand it over now to the chief guest, Professor Dr. Bimal N. Patel. Over to you, please.
A very good afternoon. Thank you very much, Dr. Saha. Professor Dr. Nasm Shaheen, Padma C, Lieutenant Colonel Sri Sajjad Ali Zahir, Veer Protik ji, Swadhinata Padak, Mr. Shekhar Dutt, very distinguished member of our society, Major General Chandrakant Singh ji, VRC, serving and retired armed forces personnel joining us, dear colleague Lieutenant General Dr. Subrata Saha, students and members of the Rashtriya University, ladies and gentlemen. This monthly webinar series being conducted by the School of Military Affairs, Strategy and Logistics began on India's Vijay Divas and Bangladesh Victory Day. And today, we are in the month of Bangladesh Independence Day. March indeed is a historic month for both democracies, India and Bangladesh. Like General Shah brought out, it was in this month that Sheikh Mujibur Rahman gave historic speech to over 1 million people at the Ramna race course in Dhaka. On 26 March 1971, a new nation was born as Bangladesh declared its independence. This marks 50 years of Bangladesh independence and our bilateral relations. In fact, our Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, would be in Dhaka on the 26th March to celebrate Bangladesh Independence Day on the invitation of Honorable Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Madam Sheikh Hasina. Major Chandrakant spoke about the Sheikh Mujibur Rahman in this year that we are celebrating Mujib Barso. Let me tell the audience that India and Bangladesh are jointly filming a biopic on Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and that too directed by the best cinematic personality of India, Mr. Shekhar. Friends, in 2010, in a statement before the United Nations General Assembly, Honorable Prime Minister Madam Sheikh Hasina stated, and I quote, Bangladesh has established an international crimes tribunal to try persons responsible for war crimes and crimes against humanity, including genocide, arson, rape, committed during our war of liberation in 1971 and immediately thereafter. This action is in accordance with the rule of law as reflected in the 1998 Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, which we have ratified and which aims at bringing perpetrators of war crimes, genocide, and crimes against humanity to justice. I believe that only justice can heal the unforgivable, deadly wrongs of the past. I unquote. So friends, this very statement, which inspired Madam Hasina to speak at the UN General Assembly, is also echoed in the Constitution of Bangladesh, which has been amended in 2011 and which states, notwithstanding anything contained in this Constitution, no law nor any provision thereof providing for the detention, prosecution, or punishment of any person who is a member of any armed or defense or auxiliary forces or any group of individuals or organization, or who is a prisoner of war for war crimes and other crimes under international law shall be deemed void or unlawful, or even to have become void or unlawful on the ground that such law or provision of any such law is inconsistent with or repugnant to any of the provisions of these constitutions. These reaffirm Bangladesh's commitment to uphold the rule of international law and prevent and punish anyone committing the crime of genocide. It was clear that murder, arson, rape, looting, and many other crimes, both under civil and military laws of Pakistan, were committed on a vast scale. Many of the provisions of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights were violated in the situation of hatred, violence and destruction which prevailed. Some of the actions of the Pakistani army and auxiliary forces were directed against Bengalis simply because they were Bengalis. Geneva Conventions were violated throughout 25th March to 16 December. The massacres of unarmed civilians, the destruction of villages and parts of towns, the rape of women, the torture and intimidation of prisoners, the taking and killing of hostages, the frequent executions without trial, the failure to tend the sick and wounded, all these, wherever they occurred, and whether as acts of repression or intimidation, or as punitive measures or as reprisals, remain inexcusable crimes. After the initial holocaust of the army crackdown in Dhaka, there was pursuit of particular members of three identifiable groups, namely members of Awami League, students and Hindus. Anyone who was identified as belonging to one of these groups was liable to be shot at sight or to be arrested, and in many cases, severely ill-treated or to have his home destroyed. The fact these groups were singled out for special attention itself militates against the finding that the intent was to destroy in whole or in part the Bengali people as such. Friends, under the Genocide Convention, which Bangladesh has ratified, India has ratified, Pakistan has ratified, there are no number of obligations not to commit genocide, to prevent genocide, punish genocide, enact necessary legislations. And when we see these violations taking place, no one can accept that these crimes can go unpunished. With the focus on crime of genocide, today's webinar once again brought us the vivid and graphic memories of 1971 war. The whole world condemns this crime, and there was never, there is never, and there will never be any scope for anyone to escape the crime of genocide. As much as national law are vigilant, international law also remains vigilant. And therefore, the establishment of the tribunal and the subsequent trials and the history thereof and the jurisprudence which has emerged once again have reassured all of us that there is no scope, and the international community condemns in the harshest manner possible the crime of genocide. War as a machinery and warriors as agents of war have solemn obligation to conduct the hostilities and operations within the letter and spirit of international humanitarian law, of which Geneva Conventions stand out uniquely, protecting the interest of eligible population. And therefore, these webinars brought out a number of heartbreaking stories, episodes, the violations, gruesome violations of the laws and the practices which remain condemned. And only today we could come to know, thanks to the organization of this series of webinars by the School of Military Affairs Strategy and Logistics under the guidance of General Saha, that we not only learn the history of the war, but we as students, as academicians of international law, learn how there is no scope for any war whatsoever. The United Nations Charter provides us means for resolution of disputes in peaceful manner. And also, thanks to the 75 years of establishment of the United Nations and the work which it has done, and for which India and Bangladesh remain very committed members and hold the ideals of United Nations in the great deal, that we both countries have committed ourselves. But once again, we take this opportunity to reaffirm our commitment to the ideals of international humanitarian law, international law, and once again condemn the crimes of genocide, crimes against humanity, in whatever form, by whomsoever, by wherever. As we mark 50 years of our relations this month, we all can proudly look back at our engagements, medical, social, economic, political, and military. Once again, I congratulate my brothers and sisters in Bangladesh on the Independence Day and look forward to cementing the relations between the Rashtriya University and the institutions of learning of Bangladesh. And once again, I would say Joy Bangla, Jai Hind. Thank you.
In the end, it remains for me to propose a vote of thanks with the permission of our chief guest, Dr. Vimal N. Patel and Lieutenant General Shah. Firstly, Dr. Vimal N. Patel, Vice Chancellor of Rashtriya Raksha University and member of National Security Advisory Board, and our chief guest of today of this webinar, Mr. Shekhar Dutt, Sena Medal, Indian Administrative Service, former Governor of Chhattisgarh and a war veteran, Padma Shri Lieutenant Colonel Quazi Sajjad Ali Zahir, Veer Protik, Swadhinata Padak, Mukti Jodha, Professor Dr. Nasm Shaheen, Honored Professor and Freedom Fighter, Lieutenant General Subrata Shah, Param Vishish Seva Medal, Uttam Yuddha Seva Medal, Vishisht Seva Medal and Bar, retired Director of School of Military Affairs, Strategy and Logistics, and also member of National Security Advisory Board. Other distinguished guests, students, faculty of Rashtriya Raksha University, I must mention my deep sense of appreciation to all our speakers for showing their personal stories of valor, of hope, of pride, and also of personal suffering, hardships, and pain. It takes a lot of courage to speak about your hurts. These were golden words which we will always preserve in our minds and in our hearts. History was relived by us together with you today, and we are really thankful to you. I thank Professor Dr. Vimal N. Patel, Vice Chancellor, for accepting our invitation and to be the chief guest and delivering the chief guest address today. Mr. Shekhar Dutt, Sena Medal, Indian Administrative Service and former Governor of Chhattisgarh, I thank you, sir, personally on behalf of School of Military Affairs, Strategy and Logistics and Rashtriya Raksha University for delivering the keynote address and accepting to be the guest of honor for this webinar today. To all our speakers who saw the crimes against humanity at close quarters, we are deeply indebted to you for overcoming your grief, your personal loss, and being able to narrate your stories with such objective views and having the courage to pin the blame where it exists. You do not have to be guilty about anything. These were wars perpetrated against the humanity, and you have rightfully blamed them on the door where it belongs. Thank you to our esteemed speakers, Major Chandrakant Singh Vyasi, and he was first to enter Bangladesh. Major Shamshir M. Chaudhary, Veer Bukram, who at a short notice narrated his very good stories. He's a fine diplomat and a true son of the soil of Bangladesh. Thank you, our team, Ms. Kanchanaya Ramanujam, for being coordinating this event and introducing the event in such a fine manner. I also personally want to thank the university staff who have lent us support for our event today. IT team, Keyur Shah and Vaibhav Bhai, thank you very much. Your support has been excellent. Last and not least, I want to thank our Director, Lieutenant General Subrata Saha, for imagining such kind of event and we being able to get so much motivation for this event. I have to thank our students and all the other participants. There are very many A very distinguished guest I can see on the list. I'm very sorry I can't, name all of you, but they are very, very distinguished, and it is cherished to have them in this program of ours. In the end, I just say, Joy Bangla, Jai Hind. See you in the next month in another series of 1971 battle, the Battle of Basanta. That's all for us, for our side today. Nice having you over. Nice listening to all these experiences. Thank you.
With that, we conclude today's proceedings. The video recording of today's webinar is available on the YouTube channel of Rashtriya Raksha University. You may access it anytime there. Please join us next month for another webinar on the Battle of 1971. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sajjad sir. Thank you very much, Dr. Nazma. Nice to hear you. Very, very touching story. And we would really like to